the May 14th meeting of the Wastewater Management Advisory Committee, and we do have a quorum with Mary Wright, Ginny Farber, myself, Kevin Galligan, Lynn Bruno. And with us, joining us are Mike Giggy and Tim Harrison online.
John Smith?
John Smith is online.
And Carolyn's coming.
And in person, we have George Maservi and we have Rich Waldo. So I will now turn it officially over to Kevin. Good morning.
Thank you. My apologies for being late. Welcome, everybody. First up is public comment. Anyone here for public comment? Seeing none. Peggy or Mia, anyone online?
No hands raised.
Okay, thanks, Peggy. All right, post-town meeting follow-up. Where do we begin? Or end? Quick meeting, right?
Yeah.
That was impressive.
Well done.
I think good discussion. From my standpoint, good favorable outcomes. So,
Yeah, I made note of a number of concerns. I filled a couple of pages, and I try not to do much on Facebook, but I did say in Facebook, you know, comments and concerns that were raised, we hear, and we will incorporate and address as we move forward. So I thought it was a more informed participation, you know, like people came prepared and read, and so to staff, again, Mia, Peggy, you're back there, and Amanda, everybody did incredible amount of outreach. I think some of us had one-on-one meetings with folks, and, you know, I think we, you know, are open to all that, so.
yeah, and I do think at the meeting, it was just the right amount, if you will, of presentation in terms of information. In the past, I think sometimes the presentations have been way too long, and at other times, there has been insufficient information perhaps put forward at the meeting. So, again, to me, just observing it, this seemed to be, just sort of hit it right. A little discouraging that a couple folks on some topics seem to have sort of a no clue. And I think that's unfortunate when the town has gone so out of its way to provide forums, hearings, meetings, informational programs, et cetera, to walk into town meeting with absolutely not an idea or clue about a particular thing, I think is unfortunate.
Well,
But better.
we're working at it. Any other thoughts?
Kevin?
Rich, please.
Oh, go ahead.
So not to take more time on this
Yeah,
agenda
no,
item, but, you know, I did make an announcement at that town meeting that hasn't really been presented to this committee, and it was just that we opened the Phase 3 bids that came in. So just wanted to give you a brief that we did have 3 bidders that submitted bids for the project, and the total range of prices was between 18.5 and 25.5, and that is inclusive of the ad alternate area. So our expectation was that bids were going to come in right around 25 million. So getting a number for 18.5 million is fantastic. So the next steps of the process is for us to continue to review the bids and then start the formal process of giving the contractor notice to proceed, informing SRF of the bid results, and we'll go through those next steps and we'll keep you informed as we continue to get this company under contract. Just so everyone knows, the low bidder was the Robert B. Hour Company of Harwich.
Fabulous.
Thank you.
Yeah, Rich, thanks for the way you presented that to town meeting. Some people told me after town meeting, it might have been good if you came up first because, but again, we took them in order and that's the way it went. But yeah. So next up, you've kind of segued us, Rich, into update on Phase 2. But before, George, you had something else to add?
No, just something simple. I thought that the presentation of the subsidies that we get might best be conveyed to town meeting in a graphic. So, you know, a pie chart showing the pieces that we take out, because I think a lot of people learn that way, just visually. And while the slide did present the key information, I think there's a way to say it that people go, oh my gosh, we better do this now. And I think you do have new people showing up at every town meeting. We're starting to participate in local government, and it's our responsibility to communicate and educate.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, that's good.
No, it's a really good point, and I remember, I can't remember how far back in school, but we all learn differently. Some of us are more visual, some of us like one-on-one conversation, more of us, find other avenues to learn or not. But I think graphic, especially as we've been building up benefits that we're receiving, it's pretty powerful stuff. So, excellent idea. So, we have Board of Health, our health agent with us, John Nelson. Connections to date, how are things going, you guys? I know I'm not connected yet, so I'm not happy, but we're working on it.
Fine. John Nelson, Sewer Program Coordinator. We transitioned to the OpenGov, so to get the exact numbers, it's
fine.
new to me, so I'm trying to figure out how to get the reporting. But my rough estimate is we have about 65 applications in.
So that means completed
No, just yeah,
in the review stage?
in the review stage, yeah. So they have been submitted, and there's probably a few that were older paper applications that came in before OpenGov went out. So it could be slightly higher. There's 38 or so that are been approved, waiting for actual connections. There's 6 connected that I'm waiting for as-builts, and then there's 1 complete, at least 1 complete. I might have another couple as-builts in I have to process. So there's 3 possibly all done, 6 more. I'm just waiting for the as-builts.
Nice.
It's been 45 days since the order letter went out, so I think we've made substantial headway. It is with the OpenGov, it's new to me, it's kind of new, so Mia's been fantastic helping set it up. Calvin, Christina, Rich was instrumental in helping kind of formulate the permitting stuff. Health department's been great with Lee, has been fantastic helping out with it, so I just want to say thank you to all them.
Absolutely.
So how many, could you remind us how many properties there are? And one of the things that was a little frustrating on phase 1 was we had at least 2 and maybe 3 different ways of counting. So,
In phase 1, yeah, I got frustrated too, because it would go from like 300 to 302 to 307 back
Well,
to
but,
3.
you know,
So
yeah.
right now for phase 2, I believe it's 373, if I'm not mistaken.
I'm sorry?
Has some data on this if you want to.
Tim's in the background. Go ahead, Tim. You
Yeah.
want
So I think that we're tracking 374, so real close to John's number.
Okay.
But what I remember, go ahead, Tim.
I was just gonna here, I'll pull up a graphic for people to look
nice.
at. Can you all see my screen?
Yes.
All right. So, yeah, I think that some of the confusion has to do with physical connections versus owners versus accounts.
Right.
Yes.
And so I think that what we've talked about so far working through is working when we report out numbers, it's the actual connections to the infrastructure. And then, because that's kind of the actual physical connection, once that connection is made, everybody behind there is also connected. So all of the property owners and all of the water accounts are then linked to that physical connection in the ground. So I think that's kind of what we've talked about on a consultant/staff level, trying to take that approach.
I
And
think
then
one
if
of
people have specific questions about, well, how many customers is that, then we can get into that.
Yeah, I think more importantly is to have a general, not a general, but an understanding by all players as to what are we counting when we're reading out the count, and what do we mean? And Tim, that's very helpful to have the distinction between physical connections, accounts, and owners, and then we all understand what we're talking about. Because I remember the early days of phase 1, it was a real head scratcher as to who meant what by
in phase
what number.
1, there was some confusion because there was approximately 300 connections, but there was almost 1,000 property
Users.
owners. So some people thought we had a lot more connections than we did, but
Oh,
now in
that's my
phase
point.
2, we have 370 some odd connections and probably 420 property owners.
Yeah, and even for any and all of us that are close enough to it to be able to answer the question from wherever we are, whether at the post office or at Friends Market or wherever, to be able to say the progress as it comes along. It's helpful to understand what we're talking about.
So when we report out connections, we mean physical connections.
I believe so, and that's what I try, is the actual property,
Yeah.
you know, so there could be one connection might have two properties, but
Exactly.
that's
Yep.
technically one connection.
Yeah, good.
Thank you.
Correct me if I'm wrong, John, but sometimes it's not number of property owners, it's number of accounts. So there's a number of betterments that are assessed. And
It could be like, for example, a little cottage condo complex has one connections, but there could be 6 private owners
Right.
that have 6 property tax bills.
Right.
The water accounts, that could be different, because it could be one community,
Yeah.
so there might be 7.
Right, and there could also be one property owner who has 47 accounts. So it's, yeah.
I try to, when I report, I generally try and talk about the actual connections.
Okay.
Because it does get a little confusing once you add in betterment property owners and stuff.
I mean, we all love to answer questions asked, but where Lynn is gone and you have, when someone asks a question, you might need to ask them again, what
What
are they really looking for?
what information do you
And that
want?
doesn't mean we don't have the data, don't want to share it, just means we want it to be,
There's a lot of different
The same.
answers for the same
Exactly.
question, kind of,
Yes.
so.
yeah, good.
Thank you.
One thing, Rich, while you're here, and Craig's from the Finance Committee in the back, I met with him, and particularly when, John, you mentioned the as-bills. Are we continuing to work on a little more efficiency in the requirements of engineers and installers to minimize things like thumb drives? And is there any relief we can start to bring to the table here?
I think the answer is yes. I mean, I think we've already started it, but since we've had one phase of construction, it's really trying to see what is working, what's not working. So if I believe the concern was the as-built at the end of the day, and one of the things that we have now is that the day of inspection, a tie card is given at that point. So we're gonna monitor the tie cards that come in. If they end up being sufficient for recording documents to let us know that they're in conformance with the design plans, then I think potentially we could, relax that as-built requirement for the engineering, the private engineer, the property owner's engineer, to do the additional work of providing that as-built. So that's one thing, potential relief. Another thing that we had relieved earlier in the sewer use rules and regulations was the inspection requirements. Every time we went and visited for an inspection, they were getting a $100 bill for each time they inspected. So if their contractor had called multiple times, hey, I want to backfill this pipe, can you look at that? Can you come back? That was a $100 charge, and we said, no more to that.
Every
It's
visit.
one inspection fee.
Right.
It's at the end, and your engineer can certify that the installation was done in conformance with design plan. So we're constantly reviewing it. We're trying to figure out where that right balance of review is. We're consistent with Harwich right now. Other towns might be a
Right.
little different, but we are trying to be cognizant of the additional costs that homeowners have, and we don't want to continue to be painful on that.
So, the one thing when I met with Craig is, I think right in our rules and regs, a thumb drive is required. John, do you have a big box of thumb drives? Where do they all go? But I think the point is, we're all in an electronic world.
Yeah.
You share links and we're good. So I'm thinking that just to take that little requirement out might be really helpful.
Well, I'll talk with the AECom team. Thankfully Tim's on here. He'll get the same gist. They are taking that information and incorporate it into actual CAD drawings. So basically, we have pretty detailed CAD drawings of what's being installed in the ground, but whether that's necessary, whether a zip file could be just sufficient, I
Exactly.
think so. So we'll continue to work on that. Appreciate that email that you did the other day. meeting with, finance committee, different people that are going through this experience and trying to see where are those pressure points and see how we can relieve them.
Yeah, no, and again, thank you, Craig, for the meeting, because what's good about the way we work is we learn from phase one, we continue to improve regs, but we got, he's connecting just as I am, just as Jenny is, so we want to really, improve, because we're feeling the pain as well, I'm just saying.
Got it.
It has
Understood.
taken so long to get the process moving on the engineering side for us. And, so if folks think a select board member or committee member has any magic power, I don't. I really, it's clear, we're treated just like anybody else. So, but, no.
I have no
Shared
magic
pain.
wand.
It is. So keep up the good work, everybody. I was so glad to see Town Hall get connected
Yes.
the other day. So, anyway. All right. So, Rich, glad you're here, because another thing that people are really chomping for is some betterment cost information. And I rely on Tim and you in terms of assessing all the cost data that's the source, and then the analytics and the breakout and stuff. So any update on where we are? And it kind of relates to a future agenda item, like having a community meeting on betterments that we committed to, but we want to bring information to residents when we've got
So I'll
information.
probably defer to Tim to say where we are. I will say that when we met substantial completion, there was a pretty quick email that went out to both Tim and Sue saying, all right, let's start the betterment process now. We have substantial completion met. We have our billing through December 30th for our water bills, and I know they've been working on that. So if, Tim, you could just give an update as to where we are now.
Yep, absolutely. All right. So I put together this flow chart to give people a sense. Basically, there are I think of it as four main steps. There's the data gathering stage, there's the detail stage, refinement, and finalizing it. Once substantial completion happened, we started doing this data gathering stage. Water data, assessor data, parcel data, and then what's the sense for what the cost is that's going to be applied to the betterment. We have done all of that data gathering stage. We have done our preliminary setup on the calculations. We're in the process of identifying some discrepancies, special cases, and questions. Like Jenny was saying earlier, there's a lot of different scenarios, how you mix and match ownership and water accounts and one owner for multiple units, multiple owners, one unit, that sort of thing. So the process there is we go through and identify what are those special cases. Are we having trouble lining up some of the water data with the assessor data? That all of these very detailed questions. And then we get together with a number of staff from the town and come to an answer on all of those. We are targeting to have those questions resolved by the end of May. As Rich mentioned, we've been working on this. We've actually already addressed a number of questions with Sue, but we do have some final questions that we'd like to get a group together towards the end of the month here.
So Tim, could I just ask a pause, only because kind of goes back to the initial connection data, so here's where we're morphing from a physical sewer tie-in of a property to what you've kind of got in this detail box of you may have one physical connection, but you may have a condo that each unit owner is sharing in the betterment or gets their own betterment depending on, following the bylaw. So we're going from the physical world to, I'll call it the bylaw world. And,
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, and basically taking the rules in the bylaw and works for, I'll throw out a number, 95+% of the ownership cases. And then there's always a handful that are just a little different, properties that are developable but not developed,
Right.
properties that have been vacant, properties that are undergoing change at the moment. So we just actually spend quite a bit of time trying to do the right thing and the fair thing.
Yep. So that's end of May.
Yep. We take those answers, we update the calculations, and that gives us a rough sewer unit value. So how many gallons per day is a sewer unit? What is the cost of that one sewer unit? And an initial distribution of that cost based on water use, which is kind of call it the rough betterment. We think that'll be done towards the end of June. At that point, we kind of hit a pause until we have the final project cost, both from construction and other project costs that are grouped into the betterment total.
So Tim,
And
sorry to interrupt, but Rich has another meeting, so I'm going to kind of interrupt as much as I can. But so when we did issue the substantial completion, and then Board of Health issued the order to connect, where is the one-year performance period? Is it substantial completion, or is it order to connect? Because as we all know, they have 1 year that they're still on the hook. So I'm
Yep.
not sure, how long do you have to still collect cost on this phase?
So I'll start, Tim, you can finish it.
Yep.
So substantial completion is the look-back period for water. The notice to connect that was issued by the Board of Health is the connection period. So I believe they started April 1st or March 30th.
Right.
Yeah, April 1st?
No,
March 31st. So that's the start of the one-year period to connect.
So that's the one-year connection, but I'm thinking more contractual.
for the
Total
1 year one year
warranty
warranty
period, yes.
for the contractors starts at substantial completion.
Completion.
Exactly.
So that's
Yeah.
part of the reason why final cost really will not be known until at least a few weeks after the 1 year from substantial completion.
And the water use that is used to determine this basis, for what year or years is that?
3 years.
But which years?
It is because substantial completion was before the end of the first quarter of 26. It worked out to be the calendar years 23, 24, 25.
Okay. So, I mean, just interesting, but people are basically connecting before they have paid their betterment.
Yes.
Which is neither here nor there, but something I was totally unaware of, so.
Yeah.
And I sort of feel like I'm plugged into this stuff, so it's just occurring to me, so it's, yeah, it's a complicated process.
And we don't like to use that word, but.
But it is.
It is. I mean, look at this chart.
We want to
Yeah,
get
and
it, we want to get it right.
that's why I put in the red boxes. We can just focus on that level.
Right.
But just so you're aware, there is stuff going on in the background as we move through the process here.
The other thing too, I'm sorry, Tim, to just keep in mind is it's, for phase two, it's still the same calculation.
Exactly.
It's still the same
Split.
process in developing the numbers, using the numbers and so on. So it's not changed yet.
Right. Right.
Yes.
So am I correct, Tim, that the warranty period will end on March 18th of 27?
Yes.
Okay.
And I'm sorry, what's the warranty?
The contractor's on the hook for 1 year
Thank you.
following
Which is why we-
substantial completion.
Which is why we don't
You
have,
know, if a manhole cover,
Forgive me.
blows away, or, the pump station
Gotcha.
fails, they are still on the hook for all the performance.
Right. So the town is operating the facility, but if something goes wrong that's associated with the construction, then the contractor is required to come back and address it.
Right. And, we're also in what you guys call the punch list stage. So there's commitments that we've made to restoration of seating that hasn't worked, things like that. But, those punch lists tend to be lengthy, even though we think it's just a few items, but there's a little bit of cleanup still to do, right, Rich?
There is, and there's also a deadline for that to be finished, and I believe it's sometime in June, right, Tim?
Correct.
And so, with that, and I'm just asking this question because I did miss part of that in phase one, but we should be able to, so their final contract completion should be done in sometime in June. We should be able to develop a preliminary betterment, basically sometime between June and the March final completion, the warranty period ends. We should be able to provide a preliminary betterment at that time, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, but again, from a later item on the future, but, I remember vividly our first community outreach meeting, and people want to know, and as Judith
Right.
pointed out, we're shoveling out money to make connections without any understanding of what is the longer term, because I'm going to spread hours for 30 years, that's for sure. But, others may want to pay it up front. I don't know. But
But
so
that
do you-
information would have to go out with lots of asterisks.
Right, but could we, with all the caveats, be preparing something in the July-ish timeframe? I mean, with the caveats all around it?
Yeah. Well, go ahead, Rich.
No, I was hoping that you'd step in because I was going to say yes, but I didn't want to say yes while you're sitting there looking at a page full of numbers and stuff like that. But
I mean, I'm not trying to force something if it's not ready, but I think,
Yeah.
I
think that once we get to this box here, I think that once we are comfortable with that, then I think it would be worthwhile to have a meeting and basically say, hey, this is where we are. This is kind of your budgetary number,
There we go.
and explain this is what your the number may continue to change a little bit. We have to get to this box before it's official.
Yeah.
But we could probably give people a sense sometime this summer what we're looking at.
Yeah, John Nelson wants to chime in too, Rich, so go ahead.
My request is try not to post anything that's not firm. We had that problem in phase one where the betterment list was posted and the final list came out significantly different.
In
And
some
people had
cases.
printed that out.
Of course they did.
So until there was a firm number, or very close to a firm number, I would just ask that it doesn't get publicized
Well, this
because
is kind of the tension though, John. We won't really have a firm number, as Jenny mentioned, all the way to March of next year.
it kind of goes to when somebody asks what's the cost and you tell them 25, 35,000 and it comes in at 40 or 28.
Right.
The betterment, if you put something out there, whatever caveats put on, they don't care. It's that number they see. So if you say it's, minimum 5,500, but it comes in minimum 65, that's $1,000 after spending
Yeah.
30, 40 grand. An extra $1,000 means a lot.
Yeah.
So my concern from my position, I get those questions. Anything that can be done to help me along to, especially financial stuff. It's very tough for these residents,
Yeah.
property owners. That's
Well-
just my concern.
I appreciate that. Jenny, go ahead.
So one of the issues last time was that property owners did not understand that condominiumized buildings were going to be charged individually because betterments are assessed against the assessor's database, not by property address. So there were wide swings. So that would have to be one of the asterisks. And we would know what the fairly firm sewer unit would be and can give a range at least of what the betterments could be by sewer unit, not necessarily by property.
No, I can get a sense, and John, I appreciate where you're going, but I think the sense of our group, and we are advisory to the select board, but I think we would like to get information out with the caveats. Is
I
that
think we
a
have said
sense?
that we didn't, but I think we can manage it.
There we go.
I
I'm
think it's
looking over at
manageable.
Lynn, you're,
Yeah,
If anybody does caveats well, it's this one.
Well, and part of it too, anything you put out, you wrap it in caveats and be able then to go back and point to the caveats. Or you can tell people, here's the information, caveat, caveat.
Right.
And if you don't want to know and you think it, don't open it, don't read it, and wait until it's final.
Don't read the review of the movie before you see it, right?
Totally.
You're right.
I think, I think both sides are true, right? That you don't want to give somebody the wrong information. But I think it was pretty clear from town meeting that everybody really is kind of looking for financial information to really understand what what this kind of looks like. So I guess I would say if we can sort of feel comfortable that that whatever we give out is feeling in the ballpark. I think if we have any concern that the numbers are too soft,
Right.
then I think we wait till we feel like they're a little bit,
Well, I think as
Firmer.
Tim is working with staff, and John, you'll be in the mix on this detail work by the end of May, if you see any real red flags, thanks, Rich, that's kind of a reason to pause. But if you're able to address, special cases and feel comfortable, then moving into the next box, to me, means we're in a good place to,
And I get it all the time, like, what's the betterment going to be? It's kind of too early, as understood.
Right.
If you can calculate out the sewer unit number and tell the property owner, well, your sewer unit at this moment, or is going to be 1.6.
Right.
The actual sewer unit can be anywhere from 55 to
Right.
6,000, or whatever it is.
That
but
can be helpful.
I wouldn't say
Yes.
property A is, your betterment's going to be 5,500.
Right.
Your property A is 1.6 units, and a unit can be anywhere between.
There we go.
Give them a range, so
Yeah,
now they're not locked into my property, you
that-
said this.
that's helpful.
No,
I mean,
that's
at
very
least
I mean,
it's,
I understand getting the stuff out there, but understand, I don't want these people to,
You said it was
especially after all this money, they're
35,426.
trying to cut down to the dollar, and anything that you give them, they'll remember.
they do.
right.
I know. I have a blue folder, chock full with everything about sewers, and it's getting fatter by
Only
the day.
one folder?
Only
How
one.
could you do that?
Exactly. All right. Good discussion, you guys. And Craig, if you bring back to Finance Committee, we are working at it. I be happy to.
So timeline, thinking end of summer, we'll have some ballpark figure.
I think we're talking July-ish. No? That ish means August, maybe. But
Ish.
I,
Sooner
Yeah.
than March.
sooner than March, but I think we got to be firm well before Labor Day. I mean, come on,
Yeah, I mean,
people are writing big checks, and as you're contracting with a contractor after engineering, you've got to be able to plan all the elements of the pie. It just, this could be a big wedge, and it needs to be complete. Good. Tim, thanks so much for the good work. And I'll tell you, the other thing that we've learned through this, I'm looking at George, he knows all of our records and database are, all over the place, and we're bringing them together. But doing this detail work, we're actually fixing, we didn't know that in town
Forces
records.
corrections.
We're cleaning up a lot of stuff. So, yeah. We're going from paper to electronics. Very well. Okay, you guys, thanks so much on that. So, Mike Iggy, you're on. I'm going to move to IA, Innovative Alternative Septic Systems, further discussion. Health Department's here, Meredith. Come to the table with George. It might be more comfortable as we have some interactions on this, because we were kind of amazed to see how many IA systems in town that we looked at data at our last meeting?
60-some, I think.
60 or so?
And I would actually say the number might actually be closer to 80, and they're just not all captured in this database for one reason or another.
Right. So we were
And
kind
that's
of
all flavors, all varieties?
different types.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, I'll tell you, John Smith, who is on virtually, but he took a lot to heart in terms of reviewing the data. I don't know if you saw Mike Iggy's memo, and he's really educated us. As Mike, thank you for all you do to help us know the difference between ammonia and organic nitrogen and nitrates and nitrites. But it comes down to what I highlighted, the last line is, we're not accounting for things right. As he said, it's troublesome. You know, MEP assumes certain things. That's the studies that set our targets. And yet we see, you know, really good granularity in terms of our effluent, but not a lot of assumptions on what comes in because we don't really measure it. We estimate it. So it's kind of an area of, Mike, to your point in your memo, helpful, but I took away a little bit of concern. Help me, I have my feet on the ground, but any other folks before Mike comes in want to highlight some concerns they read in this to Mike? I'm thinking Judith probably has a boatload of concerns. Yes. I mean, we have basically said after our last meeting, and I've said it now publicly, these things don't work. I mean, but for many reasons, they could be.
Yeah, they could be working, and I would say the numbers Mike included are similar to what I was just out at the septic test center that the county runs, and they're seeing numbers between 60 to 90 instead of the assumed 35
Influent.
for influent.
Influent.
But we don't know. There's very few, if any, that measure influent in Orleans, so we don't have a good picture, and we don't know the water usage, and that's another important number that we need to know with all of these different fixtures that are now made to be water saving. There's a whole lot less water going into your septic system.
I mean, you know, I'm going to look at Mike because, again, my engineering mind, it just blows off the top of my head because I like mass balances, you know, for our box, incoming, outgoing, it all balances. And we don't have that balance, Mike.
Okay, can I jump in?
Yes.
Please.
Please.
Okay, good morning to you all. Let's see if I can find some slides here. Can you see those?
Coming up now, gradually.
set?
There we go.
Okay, good. So we first broached this subject, I think, at the April 23rd meeting. And we got a little bit into it, and I realized that probably to do this right, we need to have a little bit more background. There's some obvious pitfalls that everybody falls into. I tried to clarify those in my May 6 memo. And in my research, I came across an interesting paper that we can all learn from. So I'm going to try to go through this relatively quickly, but I always hate to, in a slide presentation, use the term biochemistry, but we're grown-ups. We'll do that. But what this ties into is the question of how do you get nitrogen removal credits? And you've heard me talk about the discrepancy between the numbers that are the basis for accounting in the Mass Estuaries Project, what they call MEP accounting, the 35 milligram per liter, 26.25, and the real world. And we're going to have to deal with that. So therefore, I think it's worth this little course in Environmental Chemistry 101. Now, I did a quick review of the spreadsheet that the Board of Health circulated, and I counted 55 systems on that sheet. And I hear, yeah, there may be more that aren't there. And of those 55 systems, there were about 110 individual readings. Some of the systems are characterized by a single reading, some by 2, some by 4. So to keep it simple, I just looked at all the readings and did a little statistical analysis. It's not exact, but, and so I said, okay, I'd like to see all these systems less than 10 milligrams per liter, total nitrogen. But if they were less than 20, I'd still be pretty happy. So I just counted them up, and I found 17 that are less than 10, but another 54 that are as high as 30. 2/3 of these readings are up to 30, and that's not real good performance.
Right.
Now, one of the points of confusion last time was the difference between nitrates and total nitrogen, and we should be looking at total nitrogen when we judge the adequacy of these systems. So
And
we
Mike,
take
can-
all 110 readings.
Can I ask you to pause on that, only because if we looked at that data, and I'm looking at Meredith, not all vendors, I think, is supplying total nitrogen, right? I saw a lot of missing fields of data. And are they required by Board of Health to provide that? And
There's parameters that get put in their Board of Health approval letter of what they should be testing for. The database that we gave you the data from, that's collected from Barnstable County. So
Okay.
they manage a database that makes sure there's an operation and maintenance contract in place. Us at the health department, we're responsible for making sure that initial contract is in place before we issue a certificate of compliance. And then after that, the county kind of does the monitoring and the follow-up.
Okay.
If they have any issues, they come up, tell us, and we do enforcement.
Great.
What's not necessarily getting looked at every time that information gets put into the database is, are they testing for what they should be testing?
Right.
Because the database isn't quite smart enough to do that
Okay.
yet.
Working on that?
I actually just talked to someone at the county, and they are working at creating a smarter quote-unquote database that will hopefully be completed at the end of the summer. David, who I spoke to, is more than happy to come talk to a border committee if they would like to learn more, but they're going to create it so that the database can tell them if they're not testing quarterly and they're required to. If a number's really out of the range it needs to be, why is it out of the range? And they'll have those conversations with the operation and maintenance individuals because they already have that relationship in place.
Thanks. Go ahead.
So, Mike, you remember, I'm sure, but recently when the watershed group of the Pleasant Bay Alliance was, specifically Brewster, looking at the IAs as an approach that they were going to take, DEP was really insistent that the results of an IA system be 10 or less. And most of the systems were sort of advertising and guaranteeing at 12. And because there was sort of nothing that was saying, yeah, we guarantee 10, they sort of felt that that was not an approach they wished to pursue. My question to you is 10 total nitrogen or organic nitrogen or
Which is it?
10 nitrate? I mean, I kind of go through life talking 10 and I don't know 10 what.
Those discussions, and I actually pulled out that 2020 report that was co-authored by Horsley Witten, Wright Pierce, and George Hoyfelder to say, okay, can IA systems be a part of the deal, part of the program for Brewster? And the details of this, Brewster worked backwards and said if they're gonna meet their nitrogen removal targets, they've only got so many homes that could be equipped with IA systems, and those homes would have to average 12 or 13 milligrams per liter total nitrogen if in the aggregate they were going to remove the requisite number of kilograms per year. And the conclusion of that study was probably not, there's not enough reliability that demonstrated that they could get there. And two, if they did, the level of town oversight would be very significant, and these probably wouldn't be cost effective. So in the discussions I've heard over the past few meetings, I wrote myself a note to say I need to send that report to John Smith and the Health Department in general, and so that information is available. So let's all agree right now. Everybody raise your right hand. We all agree we're going to talk about total nitrogen.
Total nitrogen. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
And double back and talk about nitrates. And that's really what I wanted to try to get across today. So I know the database may not be complete. I haven't spent a lot of time on it, the Board of Health database, but I did count 110 readings. The grand average of the numbers I had with respect to total nitrogen was 35 milligrams per liter, and the nitrate average was 16. Neither one of those numbers is good.
Right.
In the industry, particularly in watershed planning, the question is how do you account for watershed loads if there are IA systems in the watershed? And sort of the magic number that George Hoyfelder developed years ago was, well, based on a couple of thousand systems he evaluated probably 10 years ago now, the grand average was about 19. So if you knew nothing, you're at a cocktail party, somebody says, hey, how much nitrogen should come out of that? You say 19, okay. But the numbers are all over the lot, and part of what I want to do today is let you know kind of the details so you can evaluate them better. Put on your academic caps. There's kind of 5 forms of nitrogen we want to think about. Nitrates, nitrites, ammonia, organic nitrogen, and nitrogen gas. So there's more, but these are the ones that really have significance in terms of wastewater management. So look at nitrate and nitrite. It's nitrogen tied up with an oxygen. If you look at ammonia, it's nitrogen tied up with hydrogen. So if you're in an anaerobic situation where there's no oxygen present, you're probably not going to find any nitrate or nitrite because there's no oxygen there. It's probably going to be ammonia or organic. Nitrogen gas is a really interesting thing. Can everybody take a deep breath? Well, when you do it, 80% of that breath is nitrogen. We think of air as mostly oxygen, but no. Oxygen is only about 20% of the air we breathe. It's mostly nitrogen. So if you look at where all the nitrogen is in the world, most of it's in the atmosphere. And one of the biggest scientific breakthroughs that occurred over the past few centuries was a German chemist who found a way to take nitrogen gas and make it into inorganic nitrogen to use as fertilizer. So in the big picture, a lot of work was done to get nitrogen gas into inorganic forms for fertilization. And here we are trying to find a way to take the results of that fertilization or that food consumption, septic system disposal, and get it back into nitrogen gas.
Gas.
So it's a situation where the nitrogen gas is pretty harmless. So you always have to worry about if you're treating a waste material, what are you going to end up with? Well, here's a case where it's pretty good result if you end up in nitrogen gas. So, and I sometimes will call out nitrite is one of the things that gets measured in boards of health, typically asked to be measured, but it's sort of an ephemeral cousin to nitrate. So you may find me just talking about nitrate as the combination of both. Nitrites are typically less than a milligram per liter.
So Mike, if I could, again, just to delve into the education that you're giving us, if someone were to tour our wastewater treatment plant, which I highly recommend anyone do if you have not done so, is that transfer to nitrogen gas at the surface of the sequence batch reactor? Is that where the nitrogen gas transfer happens?
If you could grab a sample of the air just above the surface of the sequencer batch reactors, you'll probably find a slightly increased nitrogen concentration over the general atmosphere.
Yeah, great.
Good. So talking about the wastewater treatment plant, and whether it be the municipal one that sits in Orleans or anywhere, any municipal plant today, or the individual IA systems that we're talking about, the fundamental wastewater treatment processes are all the same. A process called mineralization converts the organic forms to ammonia. Nitrification converts ammonia to nitrate, and then denitrification converts a nitrate to nitrogen gas. So what you see is we got ammonia and organic forms we're starting with, and we're using bacteria. These are all biochemical processes. We're using bacteria to get to nitrogen gas. And you have to do each step. You can't expect success in the third step if you haven't done the second step well. So therefore, it's a temperamental process. Different species of bacteria make these conversions, and some of them are really sensitive to cold weather. So you'll find that nitrification tends to slow way down in the winter, and you can typically see higher ammonia concentrations in IA systems where in cold winters. So the effluent standards. Now, if you're a regulator, whether it be Board of Health or Mass DEP or EPA, you typically see in nitrogen-sensitive circumstances 2 effluent limitations, and the ones that are in fact in place at the Orleans wastewater treatment plant are: you must keep the nitrates less than 10, and you must keep total nitrogen less than 10. So this came up last time. Just because you've got your nitrates less than 10, okay, it's good. Right. But not so good if you've also got ammonia and organic and other forms. So historically, this is interesting because the primary concern in a public health setting for nitrate historically has been blue baby syndrome. If you have excessive nitrates in drinking water, it can be harmful to infants. Methemoglobinemia is the name of the disease. So historically, people only been worried about nitrate. But then when we start thinking about embayments and things other than drinking water, you realize that if you put ammonia or organic nitrogen into the natural systems, into the environment, before long, and I'm going to say usually within a couple hundred feet of a discharge, all the ammonia is going to be nitrate. So if you got somebody that's discharging, in my example here, 5 nitrate, but another 15 ammonia and organic, 20 total, the environment's going to see 20 just downstream from where the discharge is. So that's why you have to look at both. And if history were written a little differently, there'd only be one standard, and that's total nitrogen. Because you scratch your head and you say, well, just a minute now, if I'm less than 10 total nitrogen, I have to be less than 10 nitrate. True. But as standards evolved, the nitrate standard got put in place first, and then people said, oh yeah, we also need to constrain total nitrogen. So I came across the Shubal Pond study that I know has been underway in Barnstable.
Barnstable, yep.
And I actually found a written technical paper, which had been mostly hearsay before then, but there were 13 systems near the pond. And with oversight by the test center and funding by EPA, those 13 systems were evaluated, almost all of them for 24 months, some of them only for 12 months. And they selected the nitro technology for denitrification. John Smith's, interesting name, huh, John? John Smith is the owner of that, and he's been following and pushing it pretty hard. I think there's also one of George Hoyfelder's so-called layer cake systems there. But so a lot of oversight, sampling every month, not once a quarter or every 6 months, but every month. And people that know these systems, they're, not every day necessarily, but good oversight. So if you look at the effluent quality in terms of total nitrogen, the average of all the readings was just a bit under 10. And some of the readings as low as less than 2. A few high numbers greater than that. But you can look at this project and say, hey, this proves that you can get below that sort of threshold magic number of 10 with these systems. So I think I put that in my memo. I'm not saying that the systems in Orleans can't meet these standards. I think they can. And I think the Shubal Pond study is an example where it's shown that these sorts of systems can work. The reason I decided to give you information on that project is also they measured influent nitrogen concentrations. And many boards of health don't require the homeowner to also provide that additional testing. And I found these numbers fascinating. The average influent of these systems over 24 months was almost 100 milligrams per liter. That's high. And remember, we noted at the Orleans wastewater treatment plant, the average has been about 62 or 63. And I've raised my hand to you folks in the past and said, okay, I think 63 is a reasonable number for a wastewater treatment plant. But remember, in the MEP accounting world, we're down at 26.25.
Yeah.
So what are we going to do? So that's why I wanted to be a little more formal in my request that Kevin made to kind of provide a little bit more background here, because the nitrogen credit estimation is really important. So the Shubal Pond study, I think, is a success because it shows that you can get to 10 milligrams per liter. That's a good thing. However, major however, intense oversight, monthly sampling, and people that know the systems being right there to provide a quick response. And none of those things should you expect from Mr. and Mrs. Homeowner. So it's not that these systems can't work. It's that if they're going to work in the setting of individual homeowner ownership, there needs to be more than, a wing and a prayer. So regular town oversight's critical, and there's been talk about the forming of responsible management agencies, and maybe an arm of the Board of Health to do the things that occurred at Shubal Pond that made it work. Now, the study that Judith raised earlier, the 2020 study that EPA paid the Alliance to generate, we looked very closely, mostly George Hoyfield and me and Brian Dudley, as to, okay, how much oversight is needed? How much testing? Do you test once a year, once a month? You start at once a month and go to once a quarter? How many times do you expect the technician to be there to repair these? And we developed a cost model that says, okay, if you do this level of oversight, you're probably going to get to, in that case, we were hoping to get to 12. But the cost model says all of the expense that's necessary to get there. And when Brewster looked at that expense and the uncertainty about the 12, Brewster said, well, we're going to drop these from our plan because of the expense. So towns that have decided to use IA systems as their sole tool to meet nitrogen-based TMDLs, I'm shaking my head. I'm saying, okay, go for it, but be prepared that you're going to have a lot more oversight than you think, and it's hard to predict what the final cost is going to be. And one
No.
more slide.
Yeah, go
One
ahead,
more
Mike.
Questions. I use the term MEP accounting. So let's look at an IA system that produces 10 milligrams per liter. We're judging it against the credit threshold of 26.25 in the MEP system. So that homeowner would get a 16 milligram per liter credit, 26 less 10. But what do you do if the effluent concentration is 35, as it is in those ones that the Board of Health is tabulated in Orleans? Do you get a negative credit? Do you get no credit? What do you do? And that question, I don't know. But look at the data from Schuylkill Pond. If the influent is at 90 and the effluent's at 10, that's 90% removal. Wouldn't you expect an 80 milligram per liter credit? I think you should. Real life numbers say there's a credit there that you're missing if you use the old style MEP accounting. So when the Pleasant Bay Alliance updates its model for Pleasant Bay, and when you and Eastham get together to do the Nauset system, which one are you going to do? How are you going to handle these systems? And if as I think John said last time, if there's just a handful of them across town, it probably doesn't matter. You know, if you get 50, 100 systems across town, across 3 watersheds, you know, maybe not giving credit when nitrogen removal is really happening, maybe that's not the end of the world. But you know me, I want to get to the bottom of this. I want a system that you can look at the wastewater treatment plant and say, see, look at the nitrogen we collected. That's what our removal credit should be based on. So my apologies for all of the.
No, this is good, Mike. Yeah, I've got a few things. I'll jump in and let others think or ask questions. But as Meredith, you know, and John, we're working on a watershed-based database. So I right away go to kind of what Mike last said is, how many of these, when Board of Health approves, are approved in nitrogen-sensitive areas, or how many are not? Because I think where Mike's going in terms of credits and impacts, we need to be focused on any Pleasant Bay installed systems at this moment, and that would be nice to know. The other thing too, Mike, is just more in my kind of fun with technology hat is, are these systems getting more advanced in such a way that they're putting more smarts on board to them so that I know they can't measure nitrogen real time, they have to probably always go to a lab, but are there things about the conditions around them that make them either happier or upsets that could actually notify the homeowner or the agent, you know, the responsible management entity, that the system may be seeing some problems you should be aware of, and just send a text or send a notice or shut the homeowner's Wi-Fi down, because that will cause them to react. So,
Good question. A couple of responses. There's some really simple things, like this. If you're trying to do nitrification, you got to have oxygen. So typically these systems have an air blower that puts oxygen in, so that the forms of nitrogen that are tied up with hydrogen, you get enough oxygen so bacteria will tie them up with oxygen. Well, it's not uncommon at all for the blower to fail.
right.
Well, okay, you can have a red light that can go off on the control panel. You can have a signal sent. Those things are pretty obvious. However, when you call the Joe manufacturer and say, hey, I'd like to put in an IA system, what's the price? He knows you're talking to 6 other people. So he's not going to include those bells and whistles in his price. Certainly a savvy shopper would ask for that. But the number on the street for what these systems cost, it's the bare system. You know, it's like the car without cruise control. you, you don't get all the things you really ought to get because of the fair market system and people trying to be competitive. One other answer to that, Kevin, is that EPA has sponsored an innovation program to try to find a sensor that could be installed at just the right location that would measure total nitrogen. And, great idea, but you just look at the forms nitrogen can take. So you got to have multiple sensors. You got to have a sensor that's sensitive to ammonia. You got to be able to estimate what the leftover urea might be. So there's opportunities for this, but I think we're early enough in the growth curve of the industry to, those will help in the future, but some of them aren't available now.
Okay, thanks. Other questions?
Well, what I don't understand is if theoretically, if we didn't have watershed permits in the appropriate places, that IAs become the default. And yet, they don't work. So who's not paying attention where? And is, Kevin, when you go to your county meetings, your Cape and Islands meetings, is somebody actually being pushed into the corner of default to IA systems? Are some of the towns or some of the
towns are using IA
as the
their
default?
solution.
As
Bourne
the
is,
solution
isn't it?
strategy?
One is,
believe one
Wellfleet is
And yet-
looking.
And yet they're
This is a concern.
going to be reporting to who and saying this, I don't understand.
And this does, as Mike's pointing out, put a huge burden on the property owner.
Property owner.
So,
The installation of the whole thing.
So I don't know where this becomes the default. Is DEP requiring these towns to provide reports on the effectiveness? And I don't know. I mean, the default, to me, was kind of set up as the threat. You'd better
Yeah.
do this, and if you don't, then this is
Right.
what you're going to be
Carrot and
required to
stick.
do. And knowing that those costs are quite excessive, that folks would opt not to do that. But I don't know. Do you know, Mike, is DEP actually requiring that these systems in quote default towns be tested?
Yeah, yes, they are, but I think it's still evolving. I think you have towns that read the newspaper and see how much Orleans is paying for sewers and say, we never want to do that, without having done the analysis to say where this goes. And before you jump in, John, here's my fear, that I know at least 2 Cape towns that are thinking about relying solely upon this technology to meet TMDLs. So they spend a lot of money, and maybe they spend a little bit more money to get the instrumentation I mentioned and to make sure this gets done well. And 5 years later, you look at the data, and they didn't remove enough nitrogen, and they've got them in every property. What do you do?
Right.
You go back to those same people and say, well, nice try, but now we're gonna have to put in sewers. I don't want to be part of that conversation. So it's my sense of the solution is DEP needs to be really tough on towns that are proposing to use exclusive IA systems so that the towns know upfront what the risk is. And I can virtually guarantee that towns will no way will go around the barn the second time if everybody in town spent a ton of money for the very best IA system and they still didn't work.
go ahead, Judith.
So the other thing that occurs to me is not that regulation is every answer, and not that we can require a sensor that doesn't exist. But it does seem where we're basically requiring an IA system in an area where we've got nitrogen controls, and the whole town has, quote, nitrogen controls. And we're requiring this system so that someone can add an additional bedroom to exceed the 4 bedrooms per acre limit. And the whole purpose of the IA is to at least minimize the impact to the environment of doing that. It does seem like we should be having a very specific requirement regarding the monitoring of those functions and an alert system. So that now a company that does have a system that would alert the homeowner to a problem becomes competitive because that is
Standard.
that is the standard, and that is what they're bidding against. They're not bidding against 3 other companies that won't be offering this.
And I think
Can
John's, go ahead, John. I know you're ready.
Yeah, a couple of things. Judith, one, it's not necessarily an acres lot that where these systems go in, for a 4-bedroom to a 5-bedroom. It is typically when they have less than an acre,
Right.
where they have a half acre or
Limitations.
3/4 of an acre, and they want that additional bedroom. So that's one
But the
thing.
same idea. It's still,
same
you're
idea.
basically compensating, yeah.
Right. So then, and then to Mike's points about we have right now, we do not take credit for any IA systems in any of the watersheds that we have under development for sewering, because we right now by edict we say that you only have 10 years to even if you bring in a new system, you have a 10-year grace period, whereby at the end of that 10 years, you must go on to the sewer system. So there's no value really related to any nitrogen captured during that period of time, because you're eventually going to get on the sewer system anyway. And then finally, Mike, if I could ask, on slide 6, you had the numbers of people that the 13 IA systems that were monitored over 24, were those systems, were they there all year? Were they
Seasonal.
residential systems that
Or seasonal.
were there the entire year, or were some of those summer systems that were being monitored?
I looked for that in the article I read, John, and I recall that there were one or two where there might have been extended time in Florida sort of systems.
Right,
Maybe a month or
right.
two, not
And
just some.
right, and that's why I thought that's probably where the low number came from over the period of time, and the regular use would be higher as a percentage over time.
Yeah.
If they were there all year.
But I think, if I recall, when they were setting up that program so that they could test these out, they were looking for year-round people. Now, that doesn't mean that somebody's not going to go away for a month's vacation. I mean, there are changes, but I think that the intent was certainly that these be year-round residences, not seasonal residences. Because I think that
Thank you.
it's the seasonal that typically get the worst results, frankly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No, good.
So,
Go
one
ahead,
point
Mike.
on that, I noticed in the very first line on the slide, John Smith, as it were, the other John Smith, that owns this company, large financial incentive for him to make these work. So I don't know whether he and his staff is out there much, but I'm guessing they were. Because all of a sudden, here's a national publication that says, here's a system that gets to 10. So that's good, and that helps us know the bounds of performance here. But on the other hand, if you're putting them in sort of willy-nilly across town, you're going to have, I'll ask, how many do you have? You have like 10 different manufacturers in Orleans? So, there's a competitive factor here that made these numbers, I think, a little better than you would expect for the routine mix of systems. So,
Well, this is,
a lot to be learned.
this is really good for us to continue to be informed about, non-sewering alternatives. We get asked, what are you doing about this? But to Meredith's point, also, I look at the positives and the fact that we have an excellent, decades-running county overseen program. They're seeing not just Orleans, they're seeing Mashpee, they're seeing, so that working together is incredible. But Lynn, to your point about 2 Cape Towns that I know are relying primarily on IA systems for their wastewater management plan, Bourne and Wellfleet, and even over on the Vineyard, who in the Oak Bluffs area is proposing a small sewer area, kind of in, quote, their downtown, but the rest is IAs. And again, we're going to see the same experience that we'll learn, and hopefully, as Mike said, after 5 years, hopefully they're not penalized for
Yeah.
lack of performance, because that's not a good thing.
No, well, that was, when I was headed, if, you're told to do something, it fails, and then it's your fault. Hello,
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah, John, you were going to add?
I was going to say, like, these plants, the IA systems, it really relies on the property owner. If I get ABC sampling come out Thursday and take my samples once a quarter, the blower gets shut off afterwards because I don't want to pay electric.
Wow.
Or, I do spring cleaning, dump a couple of gallons of hypochlorite down the drain, it just kills everything. It doesn't upset the plant as much, but a private IA system, it destroys it. And so like the monitoring over in Schubel's, those people know they're being watched, so they're gonna follow through, but some rich person that just wants 5 extra bedrooms and puts one in, they don't care, it's just whatever to meet that
Right.
minimum requirement, so.
Well, I know.
The owner is really a big part of it, not the system itself, I think.
So, and the other piece of that too, again, if we're giving someone a 10-year pass to connect based on the fact that they have a system, I think it needs to go beyond just they have a system to they have a system that's meeting a particular standard. Because if it isn't, and knowing that a great deal of it is behavior, if it isn't meeting a particular standard, then perhaps that exception shouldn't be.
Well, and I have sat as liaison to Board of Health. Meredith doesn't need to hear this, John, but, I mean, these are not the homeowners that are asking for the approval. They're the spec developer who just hands these off to the new owner
Yeah.
and says, your system,
It's yours.
have fun.
It's the homeowner that's asking for it in order to get a particular.
In some instances, but a
Not
lot
always.
of times it's a large developer
Yep.
who's trying to make the property more
Marketable,
marketable.
Okay, gotcha.
yeah. So are they in fact handing the new owner an owner's manual on the boiler, the PV system, and the IA system? I doubt it. But,
NASCOM has asked that a couple of times when there were particularly sensitive projects.
mhm.
And the answer we've gotten is yes. I've never seen one.
Right.
The answer is we do ask.
It just seems fraught with so many things that can go wrong. That I'm not sure where to put the bumpers to kind of make it work. Because it sounds like, some of the technology isn't quite there, the requirements of the homeowners aren't quite specific, the oversight isn't quite enough. I mean, there are all these pieces.
I think-
And sort of where do we have to interject our requirements? And where's the education process and whatever to make it so that we don't end up with systems which are not helping us in the least bit.
And this is why DEP pushes you into the, quote, traditional approach.
Right.
And let's be clear that the traditional approach is soaring, because it is something that is very easy to monitor, very easy to control, and it's a, quote, guaranteed result.
Right.
Whereas the others are not. So as a part of the wastewater plan that we often don't mention, but people need to be cognizant of, any place that you're using an alternative approach must be backed up by a traditional approach.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, going back to phase 3 with Lonnie's Pond, yes, the oysters are working. And so we were able to exclude about 25 properties from sewering. Those properties are sitting there held in abeyance with pipes large enough to connect in the future should we need to. Because should the oysters fail, that is the requirement. So people, I think, sort of need to understand this when they're pushing for alternatives. There has to be that soaring backup that's going to get us there should the first not work. And it is going to be required that we test and monitor closely to prove that the alternative worked.
And that's adding to that,
Yeah.
the permeable reactive barriers.
Same idea.
Not only are we clear in terms of the influent, so to speak, because we're measuring at monitoring points upstream of that barrier, and we're measuring downstream. So, from an engineering standpoint, we can say it works. Now, we don't have longevity to say, what's the maintenance of that? How long will it continue to work? But in that regard, we're much better than an IA system, because we're measuring influent, effluent, so to speak.
Because someone had recently said to me, well, DEP is never going to measure every home. Yeah, they are.
They are.
That is the point. Yes, they are going to measure every home, because if you've got an obligation and a regulatory requirement to meet a total maximum daily load, you must be able to demonstrate that you've done that.
So again, good discussion for us. I'd kind of bring us back as far as wastewater management advisory. Our plan does not have IAs as our technology. This is more education for us, and certainly for Board of Health and a representative from the Board of Health to be aware of the interrelationship between things. But to Lynn, your point about having eyes on what other communities are doing, we really need to be continued to attune to what they're learning and what impacts.
The good news and the bad news,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. All right, great discussion. Mike, thanks so much. And John, I'm glad you could participate. So next up, we have a revised intermunicipal agreement for Pleasant Bay. George?
Yes, let me just say, I gave you 40 pages of material there, most of which you've already seen. No
problem.
I just wanted to make sure that, that while this is the biggest part of the agenda, it's probably the final step toward the Pleasant Bay watershed permit. So this is potentially not a long discussion at all. I gave you a cover memo from that I wrote to go with the material that Carol Ridley has already sent to be put in the select board packet.
Okay.
Before the select board is asked to approve the update to the IMA, I just wanted to give this board an opportunity to lend your support to it if you would like. So, just to briefly refresh you on this, since 2018, when we had the original watershed permit, the first one in the state, the original MEP report for Pleasant Bay has been updated. The Mass DEP updated their watershed permit regulations and their Title V regulations. We just talked about the implications of that. So in response, the Pleasant Bay Alliance revised the watershed permit. It was reviewed by this body. It was reviewed and approved by the Board of Selectmen and submitted in late 2025. And lo and behold, in early 2026, I think it was February 16th, we obtained a watershed permit updated, signed, sealed, and delivered from DEP. So the proposed IMA changes simply incorporate the updated MEP report and the loads which go to load removals. Remember, in the MEP, originally, you need to remove a certain amount of nitrogen to meet the TMDL, but any new nitrogen from new growth has to be removed as well. 100% of the new growth has to come out. So that's why those numbers change a little bit. This has already been reviewed when the application permit was submitted. I think without spending a whole lot more time, this has gone to all 4 towns. Carol Ridley will be joining me with the select board meeting, I think on June 3rd.
Okay.
Just to hopefully get this buttoned up. I think that is what the request is, to see if you are comfortable enough to support this at this time and finalize the permit and get us on our way to implementation further.
Sounds like a motion might be in order.
So moved.
Second.
So what we're acting on is just recommending to the select board that we concur and highly recommend they sign it.
Right.
I'm glad George Carroll will be there as well as you.
Yes.
There's a lot on the select board plates, and they sometimes don't remember. But we have said many times.
That's why we want to document the
Yes.
previous decisions that have been made, and Carol's excellent at that. Mike Giggy had a huge hand in updating our watershed permit, you know, but Mike, I don't think you need to attend the select board meeting per se. I think we're just at the final step here.
But I would just add, and I did feel compelled to speak about our wastewater planning efforts, particularly supporting Phase 4. And when I said regulatory obligation, this is it.
Right.
I mean, this is a binding regulatory commitment, so.
Without it, we would have legal action to force a binding commitment, so
Right.
we do need to follow through.
All right, so after discussion, by roll call, because we're virtual, I'll call on John. How do you vote?
John Smith.
I'm Mary Wright.
Hi, Jenny Farber.
I, Judith Bruce.
Kevin Galligan.
Eileen Renault.
All right, thank you, everybody. Bob Mullen, just so you know, is traveling. He sent me a note, he couldn't make it, so thank you very much. All right, next item is Mill Pond Study. Tim, I take it you're going to give us an update on this one? Awesome. Thanks, Tim. See it.
And, all right, and I'm back. All right, excellent. So as everybody's aware, we're kind of working towards the end of the Mill Pond study. Just as a reminder, the shortlisted alternatives was aquaculture, the PRB at Deer Run, and fertilizer management. What we have left is just kind of refining those projects with the information and discussion that continues to be ongoing. We are going to be setting up a meeting with Mass DEP and Cape Cod Commission.
Great.
We had previously met with the Fishery Service to talk about the aquaculture to get their input, but we'll also meet with DEP and the Commission. We're going to be putting together cost estimates for the 3 shortlisted alternatives, plus the advisory committee also asked us to put together an estimate for the sewer alternative. So we'll include that, and those cost estimates will both be for the implementation, whatever form that is for the alternative, and any of the associated studies and designs that lead to that implementation. And then kind of the final part of all of this is wrapping up all the work that we've been doing since the study started, and seeing if we can kind of condense it down to kind of a easily digestible format that allows folks to understand how we got to the conclusions and recommendations.
Nice.
And Mike and I are going to target having a draft report available by the end of June. There are a couple things along the way that we need to account for, but that is our goal at this point. We'll keep you updated.
Good progress. And Tim, I know you were at the town meeting. It was great to hear the voter support for advancing this.
Yep.
So
Absolutely.
thank you, everybody, for the work on this. Any questions of Tim on progress with the Mill Pond work? I think we're good, Tim.
What?
So I always ask George to put in the packet correspondence that comes in, particularly the detail work that Mr. Carlson continues to spend in support of the Nauset Estuary that has sprung from our Mill Pond efforts. And we don't need to get into the details because it's not really a discussion topic other than to kind of let people know it's here. I would take issue with just a few points that are in it, but at the same time, just thank him for the tremendous effort he puts in. I think we know there'll be some scheduling we'll need to do in a little bit more formal way when the time comes with Eastham, and he notes that. But I would just call out that we have not been ignoring this. We are not in violation of any state obligations. We are working in coordination with the state on this, and I think we'll get to it in the right time, consistent with our plan. I keep saying we're following the plan.
Yeah.
Any other comments from folks on this?
Remind me, anyone and everyone, I don't recall that there was any discussion at all on the warrant article.
Did
There
not
was,
hear a peep.
there was nothing, and no one stood up, no comment at all. That's what my recollection was. Thank you.
All right, next item, approval of meeting minutes of April 23rd, 26.
We had a very small,
Edits?
tiny edit, just to add one more thing to the list of documents, right? And that's already been taken care of. So
Great.
motion to approve as very small amendment.
As minimally amended.
Okay, moved and seconded. Do need to do this by roll call. John Smith, how do you vote?
I'm John Smith.
I'm Mary Wright.
Hi, Jenny Farber.
I, Judith Bruce.
Kevin Galligan.
Eileen Bruneau.
Minutes are approved. Karen, thank you as always for an excellent job. Future agenda items.
And I want to just thank
Yes.
Karen for being on top of it and doing such a good job
She
with
does.
She does.
taking care of it and then being so instantaneously responsive with making the small edits. So thank you, Karen.
Also, again, compliments to Karen because as we all know, we get into some
Weeds.
Exactly, thank you. I was looking for the right word. I was going to say minutia, but you kind of capture it just as necessary. You know, people can always watch the tape, as they say. All right, next item, we've got a batch of things coming up on the future agenda items. We already talked about June 3rd Select Board, things coming up at the end of May with Tim's work on betterments in June. So, anything else?
Yes, so I would like to suggest that we start looking at drilling down on this salt marsh attenuation. I mean, we've talked in the past about trying to get a grant, possibly doing a study. It sort of gets pushed back, which it should, which is fine. But that, and also to perhaps start looking again at PRBs. So I'm not, for all the world, suggesting that we take a pause, that we make any change to our schedule. But I think when we conclude, still down the road, when we conclude phase 4, which is kind of looking at 4 and 5, at that point, we've said we are going to need to expand the treatment plant shortly thereafter. It seems to me that that's a very good time to just have the information ready to look at that big plan of, okay, still reducing nitrogen, but perhaps I remember back to the PRB at Pawa, that was looking like a possible good alternative to soaring. And as that would be, I don't know, phases 7, 8, 6, you know, South Orleans, that we want that information in advance of reaching that point so that we're looking at that. And so we should be looking at that, and we should also start looking at that salt marsh attenuation for Poche, because those go into phases, I don't know, 8, 9. Again, knowing that there is a time piece, a huge time piece, to modifying our TMDLs and any kind of work with our wastewater plan and our watershed permit, that I think the time is sort of, it's feeling to me like we need to start looking at some of those things.
So George, I don't think you went a couple months ago, Chatham, through the Pleasant Bay Alliance.
I went through the whole slideshow because I was not able to attend,
I
yeah.
think we should follow up with Katie.
Yeah.
At Center for Coastal Studies.
Right.
Just get maybe a little presentation of what could be a research project that
Yeah.
would really help bring the scientific data
Yep.
that we've learned in Chatham. I mean, you highlighted it, Lynn, as well, and.
Leveraging the learning, right?
Exactly, yeah. So,
I mean, not
Yeah, I
that
mean,
we got
specifically to
delayed, but I
Orleans.
sort of feel like
No,
we
it's
spent a
time.
lot of time in the past year on the whole Mill Pond thing, which is fine. But I think we need to keep looking at that broad wastewater plan to say what is our most cost-effective approach, and how are we going to get there in a way that is the least cost to the town?
Yeah.
And I don't want to get waylaid off some of these other pieces.
And we have a pathway to deal with attenuation in Poche Marsh, but we've been waiting for a federal program to be released that was expected in February, March area, and still the funds, it still hasn't been announced. So I thought the money was all there, but remember, that is, as you say, that's phase 9, so we're not pressed for the minute. We have plenty to do in the meantime.
Yeah.
But we'll keep trying to look for opportunities for funds there.
good, Lynn.
The other one is to put further out, not necessarily June, July, but what we'd mentioned previously, maybe offline, was a financing and debt
Right.
discussion for perhaps a combined wastewater management advisory committee plus Board of Water and Sewer Committee
And FinCom.
and others, and, yeah, so that, you know, and advertise it, so to speak, so that,
Yeah.
yeah, and maybe after the churn of changes to players on those committees and things settle down a little bit, so whether we wait until August or September, but make sure we get that teed up and talk to the downstairs corner office about what it is we would be looking to learn and how that might be most successful. That would be great.
Because if folks don't know, and it has been mentioned, but Rich, on behalf of the town, and a number of people are participating, have brought in outside expertise to really look at all the different, you know, primarily betterment, but he's looked at a lot of other comparative data Dan Pelletier, so that really is integral to it.
That fits too, sure.
Good.
And I guess I'd add too, an ongoing sort of a touch base with maybe the folks in Falmouth to see how they're progressing with that urine diversion. What the initial feedback is, how many people are signing up for it. I mean, I know these pieces aren't falling through,
They're moving.
but I also want to be very clear that we're hearing people's concerns and suggestions and
Yes.
following up with them.
George, are you in touch with a contact? Because I monthly talk to the select board member, Doug Brown in Falmouth, to try to keep a pulse of it, but
I'll talk to you online, make sure we're getting to the right person.
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, that'd be great to have on our agenda and welcome anybody to continue to learn. There is another town that is considering urine diversion. It's on the Vineyard.
It's on the Vineyard, I think.
Yeah, I can't
is it
remember
Oak-
which town it
Oak
is.
Bluffs or
I think it
is that-
might be Oak Bluffs.
So one of the, I sat in on a lunch and learn a couple of weeks ago with that group. And one of the interesting things that we should take a closer look at is they're reporting very different results from their IA systems than, they're much more optimistic.
They meaning
They being the Falmouth group
Falmouth, okay,
For IAs or for urine diversion?
for IAs.
interesting.
Oh, okay.
Wow.
Well, again, you don't, and again, based on the presentations, you don't know where the lever was that
Right,
making people
exactly,
doing
but
things,
their
something
numbers
different,
were
so.
vastly different, that, and it came on the heels of Mike's last presentation, so again,
Wow,
their numbers were
Okay.
yeah.
much more robust.
So Falmouth urine diversion might also morph into IA update too. Yeah. Awesome, you guys. No shortage of things to do, but making progress. So last item on the agenda.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right, by roll call, John?
Hi, John Smith.
I'm Mary Wright.
By Jenny Farber.
Judith Bruce.
Kevin Galligan.
Eileen Brunel.
You're adjourned.